The security architecture of the Indo-Pacific is currently undergoing its most dangerous structural shift since the end of the Cold War. For decades, a high-intensity war between China and Japan was a theoretical specter, a remote contingency discussed in think tanks. But as we look at the landscape in late 2025, that specter has transformed into the central organizing principle of defense policy in both Tokyo and Beijing. What we are witnessing is a fundamental race. On one side, the great rejuvenation of the Chinese military machine. On the other, Japan's historical pivot toward fundamental reinforcement. This is no longer just a diplomatic standoff. It is a hardened security dilemma, where the accumulation of naval tonnage and missile stockpiles has created a pre-war atmosphere in Northeast Asia. To understand who holds the advantage, we have to look beyond the headlines and conduct a strategic net assessment of the forces as they stand today. The center of gravity for this potential conflict has shifted. It is no longer just about maritime supremacy in the East China Sea. It has expanded into a multi-domain struggle involving long-range precision fires, the cyber resilience of power grids, and, perhaps most critically, the raw industrial capacity to replace ships sunk in battle. But before we weigh the tanks and destroyers, we must identify the trigger. For years, observers focused on the Senkaku Islands, but by 2025, the strategic consensus in Tokyo has hardened. The primary vector for war is Taiwan. The Japanese leadership now views the defense of Taiwan as inextricably linked to their own national survival. If China were to annex Taiwan, it would breach the first island chain and gain the ability to strangle the sea lanes that carry 90% of Japan's energy. This has led to the designation of a Taiwan contingency as a survival-threatening situation, a legal trigger that allows Japan to activate collective self-defense. Tensions reached a fever pitch late this year, following Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi's declaration that Japan would respond militarily to force used against Taiwan. Beijing's response was immediate economic coercion, proving that the economic interdependence that once kept the peace is fracturing. In response to this fragility, the US-Japan alliance has undergone a massive transformation. The United States Military Command in Japan has evolved from a bureaucratic office into a true joint force headquarters, reporting directly to the Indo-Pacific Command. This fixes a fatal flaw of the past, the lack of real-time interoperability. Today, Washington and Tokyo are finally preparing to fight as a single, synchronized unit. We are even seeing the erosion of Japan's nuclear taboo, with over 80% of the Japanese public now open to discussing nuclear sharing, a direct reaction to China's stockpile exceeding 500 warheads. But if deterrence fails, the war will be fought on the water. And this leads us to the most critical disparity in the region, the gap between quantity and quality. In the surface war, we are seeing a clash of philosophies. The Chinese People's Liberation Army Navy, the PLAN, is betting on mass and heavy firepower. Their champion is the Type 055 Renhai-class cruiser. At 13,000 tons, it is a beast, packing 112 vertical launch system cells. It outranges almost everything in the Allied fleet and serves as the command node for saturation attacks. Japan's answer is the Maya-class destroyer and the upcoming Aegis system-equipped vessels. These ships are technologically superior, boasting the best anti-submarine acoustics and sensor integration in the world. However, technology cannot always overcome physics. In a salvo exchange, China simply has more missile cells at sea. They can generate a volume of fire that risks draining the magazines of the Japanese fleet within days. Beneath the waves, the dynamic changes. This is the one domain where Japan retains a distinct tactical edge. The Japanese Taige-class submarines, equipped with lithium-ion batteries, operate with near-nuclear levels of stealth and endurance. They are quiet, lethal, and crewed by some of the best sailors in the world. However, China is closing this gap aggressively. Their new Type 039C submarines feature angled mushroom sails to deflect sonar, and their nuclear attack boats are approaching the quietness of American Los Angeles-class subs. China's strategy here is bifurcated. Use nuclear boats for deep ocean power and swarm the littorals with mass-produced smaller submarines. But the most terrifying metric in this assessment isn't the number of ships, it's the ability to build them. China now controls nearly 50% of the global shipbuilding market. In a long war, they can repair damaged hulls and churn out new corvettes at a pace the Allies cannot match. The United States holds less than 1% of global shipbuilding capacity. If a U.S. Navy carrier is damaged, it may have to be repaired in a Japanese yard, which makes those shipyards in Yokohama or Nagasaki immediate, high-priority targets for Chinese missile strikes. This industrial mismatch extends to the air war. China is aggressively mass-producing the J-20 Mighty Dragon stealth fighter. They are betting that quantity has a quality all its own, aiming to overwhelm Allied defenses with swarms of advanced aircraft. Japan is countering with the F-35, a superior machine in terms of sensor fusion, but one plagued by slow delivery rates. Japan simply cannot get the planes fast enough to match the Chinese production lines. Furthermore, the looming threat of China's H-20 strategic stealth bomber means the PLA can strike targets as far away as Hawaii, stretching Japanese air defenses to their breaking point. This brings us to the doctrinal revolution of the late 2020s, the missile war. Japan has abandoned its exclusively defensive posture. It is now fielding counter-strike capabilities. Recognizing that you cannot just shoot down arrows, you have to shoot the archer. Japan has extended the range of its Type 12 missiles to 1,000 kilometers and accelerated the purchase of 400 U.S. Tomahawk missiles. They are even developing hypersonic gliding projectiles to target Chinese amphibious forces. But there is a catch: the targeting challenge. Having a missile that can fly 1,000 kilometers is useless if you don't know exactly where the target is. Japan is racing to build its own independent sensor network of satellites and drones, because in a war where U.S. data links might be severed by Chinese cyber attacks, Japan needs its own eyes. And make no mistake, the cyber war has already begun. Groups like Salt Typhoon are actively pre-positioning malware inside Japanese power grids and logistics networks. While Japan is rushing to train 4,000 cyber defenders, they are up against a Chinese cyber force numbering in the tens of thousands. So, what happens if the Cold War turns hot? Logistics will be the first casualty. Japan imports nearly all its oil through the Strait of Malacca. A Chinese blockade would strangle the economy. While Japan has reserves, high-intensity combat burns fuel and ammunition at an impossible rate. Reports indicate the self-defense forces would run out of high-end interceptors like the PAC-3 in weeks, leaving the country gun-starved in a prolonged fight. We also cannot ignore the human cost. Japan has already drawn up plans to evacuate 120,000 civilians from the Sakishima Islands. Moving that many people while under missile fire would be a logistical nightmare, competing for the same ships and planes needed to move troops. This leads us to the grim reality of the war games. The Center for Strategic and International Studies ran extensive simulations for a 2026 conflict. The results? In most scenarios, a coalition of the US, Japan, and Taiwan does defeat a Chinese invasion, but the victory is Pyrrhic. In these simulations, Japan loses over 100 combat aircraft and 26 naval vessels. U.S. bases on Okinawa are turned into craters. The U.S. Navy loses 2 aircraft carriers. The Chinese fleet is decimated, its amphibious capacity destroyed. The war games make one thing clear: Japan cannot sit this out. Access to Japanese bases is the prerequisite for an Allied victory. China knows this, which means their war plans must involve neutralizing Japan on day one. So, who would actually win? If Japan were to fight China alone, in an isolationist scenario, the result would be a decisive Chinese victory. The disparity in mass, industrial depth, and missile reach is simply too great. China could bombard Japan into economic collapse without ever landing a soldier on the home islands. But in a coalition war, where US naval power and Japanese tactical excellence combine, the equation changes. The Allies can deny China its strategic objectives. The counter-strike capabilities Japan is building add a critical layer of deterrence, making the cost of war too high for Beijing to gamble on lightly. Technologically, Japan is holding the line. Strategically, the weight of China's industrial complex is tilting the scales. The deciding factor for the rest of this decade will be alliance integration. If Washington and Tokyo can fight as one, the line holds. If they fracture, the quantitative dominance of the PLA becomes overwhelming. Ultimately, the winner of a Sino-Japanese war will not be the side with the best ship. It will be the side that can endure the most profound national pain. And in a test of political will, China's authoritarian system may offer a grim advantage over a democracy sensitive to the catastrophic costs of modern war. Thank you.